Texas State House Democrats once again stayed out of their own state today, delaying the unusual mid-decade Republican redistricting effort in that state. We're now in week 2 of this standoff over the new congressional maps for U.S. House seats that could give Republicans at least 5 additional seats in next year's midterm elections, thus staving off any potential midterm losses for Trump and the GOP. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott today said that law enforcement officers are scouring the state of Texas to try and arrest any state house Democrats who are avoiding their business in Austin. But today, the leader of the State House Democratic Caucus said his party will keep denying a quorum to be called unless Governor Abbott prioritizes flood relief legislation over redistricting.
If Governor Abbott says we will take care of the people of the state of Texas first, if he makes that commitment today, we'll be back.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott joins us now. So, Governor, 4 items related to flood relief are on the agenda. When you call the next special session, would you consider removing redistricting from the agenda in order to pass this very, very starkly needed relief for Texans?
So a couple of things. One,
I love how they've pinned this back onto Governor Abbott. Like, the blame lies with Abbott. He is the one that is preventing the rollout of aid to Texas flood victims. He is the one who oversaw the disaster that took place and failed the people of his state. Maybe Greg Abbott should be wondering why Ted Cruz left the state to Greece instead of wondering why Democrats left the state to stop Texas from cheating on elections.
is the first 4 items on the agenda right now deal with flood relief. Second is during the regular session, there are about 200 pieces of legislation that get passed every single month. I'm asking for only 18 items to be passed during this 30-day special session. They know full well that they have every capability of addressing all these pieces of legislation. And what these Democrats have done, they have turned their back on the people of the state of Texas. For one, it is gutless for Democrats to cut and run. That's anti-Texan. Ever since the time of the Alamo, Texans have stood and fought their ground. Here, Democrats are fleeing like a bunch of chickens. Second, they can address both the redistricting map as well as all these other issues that are so important to their fellow Texans. Know this, and that is average Texans who are watching this show, they have to show up to work. If they don't show up to work, they could get fired. These Democrats think they are above that. These Democrats think, well, they can take the day off, they can take the month off, they can jet set across the country, ignoring their duty. By the Constitution, they are required to meet and consider and act on every bill that becomes before them. They're failing to fulfill their constitutional duty.
Yeah, they are, just to explain for...
Well, actually, failing to meet the constitutional duty would be redistricting a state well before the 2030 census, which is incredibly rare and really unfounded in any sort of facts or reality. The only reason they're doing this is because Donald Trump called the governor of Texas and said, we're entitled to 5 additional Republican seats in the House of Representatives because Texas is a red state. Therefore, all the seats in Texas should be red. That's not how it works. Even in states that have a Republican majority, there's likely still Democrats in Congress because certain districts represent who the people voted for. And you have a city like Austin that likely elects Democrats because people are voting for Democrats there. And then you have Greg Abbott who says the whole state, everybody should just be a Republican, and we are going to draw new squiggly lines on the map to make that a reality.
Viewers who are not Texans, as the minority party with a very small minority, they argue that their only way to stop this redistricting effort is to deny Republicans in the State House a quorum. So that's why they're doing what they're doing, just to provide their explanation. The Texas Tribune reports that in June, you told Texas Republican delegation in Congress that you were reluctant to add redistricting to the legislative agenda in Austin. The Tribune says that President Trump then called you to discuss redistricting, and you agreed to put it on the special session.
You basically obeyed the orders of your supreme ruler, Donald Trump, who said, put this on the ballot. And now they're going to vote on it because Texas is trying to cheat for Donald Trump. The only thing stopping them is the Democrats who left the state, preventing them from holding a vote.
Agenda. Would you have gone forward with redistricting if President Trump had not personally gotten involved and asked you to do this?
To be clear, Jake, this is something that I've been interested in for a long time. First of all, I've been involved in redistricting litigation for more than 20 years now. Second, one thing that spurred all of this is a federal court decision that came out last year. By the way, a case that was filed by Democrats. The federal court decision that came out last year said that Texas is no longer required to have coalition districts. And as a result, we had drawn maps with coalition districts in it. Now we wanted to remove those coalition districts and draw them in ways that, in fact, turned out to provide more seats for Hispanics. For example, 4 of the districts are
They're going to try and spin this. Just watch. They're going to try and spin this like they're doing something to increase representation for Hispanics. Because they say, oh, well, Hispanics don't want to support radical leftist policies, so therefore we're going to tell them who to support. We're going to make sure that their districts are overwhelmingly Republican so that we get Republican people in office. Or they're going to take anybody that is willing to vote for a Democrat and draw little squiggly lines around them so that they can't infect the Republican districts, and that's going to allow them to steal more votes.
Predominantly Hispanic. It just coincides it's going to be Hispanic Republicans elected to those seats. One thing that's happened in the state of Texas is the Hispanic community, a lot of it, have decided they're no longer with the Democrats who believe in open border policies, who believe in going.
Then let them vote. Let them decide who they want. You're seriously going to sit here and tell us that these Hispanic voters have decided they don't want Democrats. Therefore, we need to make the decision for them and make Republicans their representatives. Like, if you're claiming that they don't want Democrats anymore, then they would just vote that way, right? That's how they would vote. But you're telling us that that can't happen. Therefore, you have to redraw Texas's map so that Republicans represent these people regardless of who they vote for.
Against our law enforcement who believe that men should play in women's sports, and they instead align with the Republicans.
Oh my God. Sorry, I just have to keep pausing because what are we talking about here? We have issues in America. We have economic issues. We have education issues, environmental concerns. We're funneling money into overseas wars. And what are we talking about here? Men in women's sports? Nobody is talking about that. And by the way, transgender Americans are Americans. These are American patriots. They're American citizens. Can we stop demonizing our fellow Americans because of your radical religious fundamentalism? You talk about how people in the Middle East are radical Islamists, radical Muslim terrorists, whatever, when the real terrorism is happening here by domestic terrorists known as white Christian nationalists who are threatening their fellow Americans who happen to be gay or transgender or any religion that's different than their fundamentalist evangelical ideology.
What we want to do is to draw districts that give those Hispanics and African Americans in the state of Texas the ability to elect their candidate of choice.
Well, that's not really, I mean, you're doing this to give Trump and Republicans in the House of Representatives 5 additional seats, right? I mean, that's the motivation, is to stave off any midterm election losses.
Again, to be clear, Jake, the reason why we're doing this is because of that court decision. Texas is now authorized under law that changed that was different than in.
I like the question, Jake. I like just hitting him directly. But this is the problem with mainstream media nowadays is people are watching this. They look at Jake Tapper as the one who is the radical leftist lunatic, even though Jake Tapper is anything but. And they get to hear Greg Abbott respond. And people who support Greg Abbott, they feel validated when they hear Greg Abbott explain what's really going on and make Jake Tapper look bad. So, in my opinion, what should be done is Greg Abbott shouldn't even get the time of day, because you put him on TV, you let him talk, and you at least let him try to lie and you let him try to trick Americans. But if you don't platform him at all, then there's no way he has the ability to say what they're doing isn't exactly what Jake Tapper described, which is they're trying to steal 5 additional seats so that they can increase their margins in the House of Representatives to cancel any midterm loss that they might be expecting because their policies are that unpopular.
2021, when we last did redistricting, under new law as well as new facts that surfaced in the aftermath of the Trump election, showing that many regions of the state that historically had voted Democrat that were highly Hispanic now chose to vote Republican and vote for Trump as well as other Republican candidates. Districts where the electorate voted heavily for Trump, they were trapped in a Democrat congressional district. They have every right to vote for a member of Congress who's a Republican. We will give them that ability.
You just told us that Hispanics hate the leftist Democratic policies so much that they want to vote for Republicans. Now you're telling us again that they can't do that unless you make them vote Republican. You can't have your cake and eat it too, Governor Abbott.
The law is pretty clear that state legislators in Texas denying the majority party a quorum can be fined and can even be arrested. But now you and your administration are taking the unusual step of asking for Democratic leader Gene Wu, who we played a clip from a little while ago, to be actually removed from office. What gives you the right to override the will of his voters who elected him?
So I think the will of the people who elected him are not being met right now. The people who elected him as well as the other.
He didn't answer the question at all. The question was, how are you going to remove him from office? Because you can't do that because he was voted into office. And he's saying, well, the people who voted for him, they're not happy with the fact that he left the state. No, I'm pretty sure they're probably very pleased that their representative is actually doing something to fight back against this Nazi-level fascism. And now you're just saying that you're going to find a way to remove him no matter what?
Democrats who've run from their duty, they didn't elect them to run off to Illinois. They elected them to go to Austin, Texas and cast votes as required by the Constitution. What I have the authority to do as governor is to require these members of the legislature to follow the Constitution, which is very clear on its face, where it says that these legislators must act on bills before them. They're refusing to perform their constitutional duty, and that's exactly why I filed that lawsuit in the Texas Supreme Court, and the Texas Supreme Court has required Gene Wu to respond to that, and the Texas Supreme Court is considering that right now. And what I'm seeking to do in that case is to have Gene Wu removed from office for failing to perform his constitutional requirement.
So your state had a Congresswoman, Kay Granger, who tragically developed dementia, and then in the middle of her, I guess, second year in office, in her final term, she and her family just checked her into a dementia center in Texas, and nobody represented that congressional district for like 6 to 8 months or something.
Yeah, what happened there, Abbott? What happened there? I like the question, Jake. I think you're gaining some points back. What happened there? You're telling me that wasn't a total abandonment of duty? They didn't leave their post? What happened? What happened to that one?
Something, and I don't recall you saying anything then.
Well, I have the authority to apply the Texas Constitution to these members of the Texas House of Representatives. With regard to members of Congress, that's going to be up to the congressional delegation and to the federal laws of which the state would have no control over. What I do have control over, Jake, is what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
So you're telling us that you have control over something that you actually don't have control over, which is you can't remove somebody from office because you're not the dictator of Texas. But you're saying you have control over that. But then when there's an instance of this congresswoman who was actually completely out of office, even though they didn't let anybody run for election during that period, you had no say in the matter. You couldn't even at least talk to Congress or the president about that. You're the governor of the state. You just pretended like it wasn't happening so that a potential challenger didn't take the seat.
That is, I called a special session, I put items on the agenda, and by Texas law, those runaway Democrats are required to act on that agenda. They're failing to do their duty. So there's a violation of state law that allows me to seek the removal of those who've abdicated their responsibility. Let's play this out. If they do not get removed by this court, this process is going to continue. I'm going to call special session after special session after special session. They could remain in hiding for literally years, tying the hands of the state of Texas from performing essential government needs. That cannot be allowed, and that's exactly why I should prevail in my lawsuit to have this Democrat removed from office, because they are denying Texas the ability to conduct business.
I mean, not entirely, though, right? Because, I mean, there are filing deadlines for candidates in September and November, and then in March, of course, would be the primaries in Texas. So they really, I mean, I'm not advocating this, but they really only need to wait you out until the fall.
Yeah.